Welcome to Decoding Healthcare Research. I'm your host, Efrain Riveros, Dr. E. Efrain. I am an associate professor of anesthesiology at the Medical College of Georgia in the United States. Today we will be talking about cholesterol. Why cholesterol? Well, I have found paradoxical the fact that as we limit our intake of cholesterol, it is becoming more difficult to actually control our levels of total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol in our plasma. So there must be something going on that we don't really understand, because to me it's counterintuitive that if you limit your consumption of cholesterol, you are unable to control your plasma levels of these substances. So let's start by trying to answer a question. So what is the question this time? Is the cholesterol in the diet associated with the cardiovascular disease and cardiovascular risk? Let's try to answer the question starting with some background. First of all, we need to understand that the cholesterol comes from two different sources. One of them is the diet, and the other one is the biosynthesis by the liver. So the liver has the ability to create new cholesterol. And these two mechanisms, or these two sources rather, exogenous and endogenous, are in continuum equilibrium under physiological conditions. However, in some circumstances, that balance between endogenous and exogenous cholesterol is damaged. And when that happens, you may have some trouble trying to control your plasma levels of cholesterol, both total cholesterol and cholesterol as LDL. So let's start talking about the exogenous cholesterol. You can find cholesterol in different sources. One of them is the egg. So there are approximately 200 milligrams of cholesterol in one egg, and you can compare that to the amount in other food sources, such as some seafood like crab or shrimp. Both of them have approximately 210 milligrams of cholesterol. There are other sources that are even richer in cholesterol, like liver of beef and chicken. The liver of a chicken can contain up to 680 milligrams per 3.5 ounces, whereas the liver of beef contains approximately 380 milligrams per 3.5 ounces. Other food sources have less cholesterol, like fish, like salmon, for instance, has approximately 70 milligrams, whereas lean ground beef has approximately 80 milligrams. As you can see, the amount of cholesterol is significantly higher in egg and in offal from different animal products. The Once the cholesterol is consumed in your diet, that cholesterol is absorbed by the intestinal cell via a specific receptor that is called the Niemann-Pick L1C1 receptor. This receptor is used by the intestinal cell to incorporate the cholesterol into the cell, into the cytoplasm, and some process of esterification takes place there. Most of the cholesterol is esterified. There is a small amount of cholesterol that remains free, and this one can either be directly delivered to cholesterol HDL lipoprotein or return to the lumen of the intestine, to the point that approximately one fourth of the total cholesterol that you consume is actually lost in feces. So that cholesterol that is esterified can be added to a special lipoprotein that is assembled in the intestine called the chylomicron. And this chylomicron contains not only cholesterol but also triglycerides. And once you have the chylomicron molecule assembled, that one can go to the blood and go straight to the adipose tissue where it gets unloaded from triglycerides. So the remnant of that chylomicron contains a lot of cholesterol, and that chylomicron is taken up by the liver and is going to be part of the cholesterol pool within the hepatic cell. The cholesterol pool that I just mentioned is composed of different sources. One of them is the remnant of chylomicron. Also, LDL cholesterol can be taken up by the hepatocyte. And in addition to that, the liver cell is able to generate more cholesterol to enhance the amount of cholesterol within the cell. That cholesterol can be used for different purposes. One of them is to generate bile salts and bile acids that are going to help with the absorption of fat in the intestine. Cholesterol is also important to be part of the structure of the cell membranes in every single cell in the body. Additionally, cholesterol is necessary for the synthesis of sex hormones and the synthesis of steroid hormones, and is also important to synthesize vitamin D. It is also used for the absorption and metabolism of liposoluble vitamins. As you can see, cholesterol is critical in several important physiological processes. And in my opinion, cholesterol should not be considered our enemy. Actually, we need to prioritize the consumption of cholesterol to maintain normal levels. But let's dig deeper. How does cholesterol get synthesized by the liver? Well, the liver has a very complex enzymatic system, but the rate limiting step of this system is called HMG CoA reductase. This enzyme is the most important one to synthesize cholesterol. This enzyme is under the control of a transcriptional factor called steroid regulatory element, or SRE. This SRE is able to enhance the activity of the enzyme and hence is able to increase the production of cholesterol. So that is one of the targets of SRE. However, it's not the only one. SRE as well is able to increase the expression of the receptor of LDL to take up more cholesterol from LDL and increase the cholesterol pool. And at the same time, it is also able to stimulate the production of a protein called PCSK9. This one has a negative feedback effect on the LDL receptor. In other words, uh, when you block this enzymatic system, say with the statins, you are decreasing the production of cholesterol, but you are also affecting the uptake of cholesterol from LDL. And it, because the mechanism involves on the one hand the increase in the uptake of cholesterol, and on the other hand a decrease in the uptake of cholesterol. This is a mechanism for the tolerance and resistance to the effects of statins after a long period of administration. This is something really interesting. So let's go back to the cholesterol pool. I mentioned that the cholesterol pool is composed of cholesterol taken up by the liver, in part from cholesterol coming from the diet, and also cholesterol that is directly synthesized by the liver. Once that cholesterol is synthesized by the liver, part of it is released in the form of another lipoprotein called VLDL. This one has both cholesterol and triglycerides. Once this VLDL gets to the adipose tissue, it's going to release the triglyceride part by the action of the lipoprotein lipase in the adipose tissue. And the remnant of VLDL is actually called IDL, or intermediate density lipoprotein. This IDL gets enriched in cholesterol by the HDL. There is like a constant exchange of cholesterol between HDL and IDL. Once the IDL gets rich in cholesterol, it's called LDL. Under normal circumstances, this LDL is useful because it takes cholesterol to wherever is needed. However, under circumstances of excess of cholesterol, the LDL has the ability to deposit in the vessel walls after a process of oxidation. Once the LDL is oxidized, it is taken up by the macrophages at the level of the vascular wall. The macrophages then try to sterify this cholesterol, and then they form what is called the foam cells. This process of esterification can be saturated, and at some point, the macrophage is full of free cholesterol, and this free cholesterol is toxic to the macrophage. So this free cholesterol is released into the plasma, and in plasma, HDL is able to take it up. HDL now has an excess of cholesterol, and it can do one of two things. One is to give more cholesterol to the LDL lipoprotein, and the other one is to take it to the liver for it to clear it. When the cholesterol is delivered to the LDL, we enter a vicious cycle because this LDL is going to deposit again in the vessel wall, and it gets oxidized, and again, the macrophage is overwhelmed by the amount of cholesterol. And this situation is actually what explains the formation of atheroma and cardiovascular risk. So this is exactly what we want to avoid. Now, in terms of cardiovascular risk, let's evaluate what the evidence says regarding the use of dietary cholesterol. There is an interesting study published in 1994 by Dr. Ginsberg in the journal Atherosclerosis and Thrombosis, and he establishes a dose response curve for dietary cholesterol, having the patients consume either 0, 1, 2, or 4 eggs per day, knowing that 4 eggs in one day represent approximately 800 milligrams of exogenous cholesterol. He found that there is a linear relationship between the amount of cholesterol that these individuals took in the diet and the total cholesterol in plasma, as well as the LDL cholesterol in plasma. The linear relationship is such that the total cholesterol increases in 1.47 milligrams per 100 milligram of cholesterol, and the LDL increases in 1.38 milligrams per 100 milligrams increase in cholesterol. This means that if you increase the total cholesterol to, say, 1,000, you will have an increase in the order of magnitude of 10 times, which would be around 14 milligrams in total cholesterol and 13 milligrams in LDL. As you can see, the increase in the plasma concentration of LDL and total cholesterol is not extremely high. On the contrary, it is relatively modest if you think about it. Now, they also observed that there were no significant changes in triglycerides or any other lipid substance. In regards to HDL, they observed that there was a slight increase that paralleled the increase in LDL. In other words, under physiological conditions, because these were healthy individuals, as you increase the intake of cholesterol, the internal production of cholesterol decreases, and you maintain a relatively stable lipid profile. And the modest increase that you experience in LDL is offset by an increase in HDL to maintain a physiological balance. In 2014, Griffin published a study in Current Nutrition Reports, and he found the same thing, that the effect of dietary cholesterol on total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol is very modest. In 2022, in the journal Nutrients, Fernandez conducted a systematic review, and he found that the intake of cholesterol did not change biomarkers of cardiovascular disease. Actually, they found a better profile with increase in HDL concentration. So they found that the effect is very modest and doesn't really change much. There's one thing that we need to understand here. When I mentioned the HMG-CoA reductase, I talked about the different stimuli that lead to its production. But at the same time, once it is produced or activated, rather, it needs to be degraded. And that degradation can happen via two processes. One is ubiquitination, and the other one is phosphorylation. Ubiquitination is regulated by the concentration of insulin and the blood sugar. If you have a high concentration of blood sugar and a high concentration of insulin, especially when insulin peaks, this process is actually slowed down in such a way that the enzyme is not inhibited. And as a result of that, the production of cholesterol increases. In other words, if you are consuming X amount of cholesterol and at the same time you are, consuming um, uh, simple carbohydrates, for instance, that stimulate the production of insulin in big amounts, you will experience this process, and then you will have the cholesterol in the diet in addition to an increased production of cholesterol in the liver. So you end up with a higher concentration of cholesterol. So the problem here is not the cholesterol of the diet, it's actually the peak of insulin that inhibited the ubiquitination process for degradation of HMG-CoA reductase. Something similar happens in uncontrolled hypothyroidism. And in this occasion, the lack of thyroid hormone leads to a decrease in the phosphorylation of this same enzyme, and we end up having an increased production of cholesterol. So that's why patients with hypothyroidism have a hard time trying to control their levels of cholesterol. In conclusion, cholesterol in the diet is benign as long as you are not consuming processed food. You have no problems with diabetes mellitus, metabolic syndrome, or insulin resistance, and you don't have uncontrolled hypothyroidism. If none of these conditions are happening at the same time, there is a nice balance between exogenous and endogenous cholesterol. If you have any of these conditions, then that balance is lost. And in addition to the cholesterol in the diet, you maintain a high production of endogenous cholesterol. What can you do about it? You need to limit the stimulation of insulin so that you are able to restore the balance between endogenous and exogenous cholesterol. I would say that in conditions of no insulin resistance, the balance is maintained and you should be free to consume a normal amount of cholesterol in your diet without a specific regard about it. But if you have any of these conditions, you need to be more careful with the amount of cholesterol that you are consuming. I hope this brief explanation answered the question that we defined at the beginning of this podcast. And don't forget to leave us your feedback, and see you in the next episode.